Ukraine and Russia have been attacking each other overnight, a week into Ukraine's incursion into the Russian border region of Kursk. The Defense Ministry in Moscow says its air defense units have destroyed 12 drones over Kursk and one each over Belgorod and Vorozhny. Ukraine's military says it shot down 30 Russian drones and 2 missiles. Russian war bloggers report continuing battles in Kursk as well. They say Kyiv's forces are trying to expand their control but are being met by reinforcements sent by the Kremlin. Thousands of people have been evacuated from Russian towns and cities as the Ukrainian troops advance. Ukrainian troops, highlighted here in yellow, are reportedly as deep as 32 kilometers inside Russia. Ukraine's plan seems to be to draw Russian forces away from the front line in Ukraine, shown here in red, where Moscow has been making slow but steady gains. Let's speak now to Dr. Patrick Bury, former infantry captain in the British Army, former NATO analyst and a defence expert at the University of Bath. Always good to have you with us here on the BBC. We've just had a statement coming out of Ukraine saying they're not interested in keeping this territory in the Kursk region. So I wonder what their intention is. What's going to happen now?
Yeah, that is really interesting because we kind of got readings from some top Ukrainian officials about the operational objectives, and they were to draw, as you mentioned there in your intro, to draw forces away from the front line in Donetsk, where the Ukrainians are under real pressure. We've had some reports of that, but it's unclear whether that's been successful. The second one is obviously deliver a morale boost to the Ukrainian armed forces, especially the army, who've been under a lot of pressure for the last year, and the nation. I think we can say this has done that already in the short term, at least. And the final one was to bring the war to Russia, basically, is show that the war can be brought to Russian territory and then destabilize as a result of that the Kremlin. I think that's been done to a degree, again, in the short term. But the longer term strategic objective looked like, were they going to try to hold some ground here in case they're forced to negotiations, especially under a potential Trump president? And an operation like this would have taken months to prepare. It's not the kind of thing you do off the back of the cuff, and especially the way it's been executed very well. So if you rewind a few months, that Trump presidency was more likely than potentially it is now. So it looks like a high stakes move and a high risk, So it's I'm kind of surprised at this, where they're actually coming out and saying, well, we're not going to take any territory. I thought a more likely outcome might be that they've tried to take at least some, but further back into the pocket, the salient that they've created.
And whether or not they will continue attacking as well, whether they're just going to stick with what they've got so far or keep pushing on.
Yeah, the early days of these exploitations and breakthroughs essentially are where you get the most momentum. You have the initiative, there's chaos in the enemy, and they're trying to react. As it goes on, you run into more problems in terms of your own sustainment. How do you sustain this over the long run? Your command and control, and also the risk then of kind of getting overexposed and being cut off, especially if you're racing down roads towards towns, etc. So over time, I would have expected, I think a good few of us looking at this closely would have expected that the Russian sort of overmatch in forces in the area over time, as they can mobilize them and get them there, would stabilize, first of all, the line, and then start to attrit the Ukrainian forces and then potentially reduce the pocket. But that will take time, I think. I think it's the most likely course of action at the moment. But if the Ukrainians, at this point that you raised there about them saying they don't want to cover territory, to go in like this, with this amount of elite forces, well kitted out Ukrainian brigades, and then try to withdraw in contact is pretty difficult from a military perspective. This is one of the most difficult things to do is a withdrawal in contact. So if that is what their aims are, it's just like a big raid and they're going to pull back. It would make sense because they want to preserve their forces and they've had the political shock of doing it. It's a bloody difficult thing to do.
We have that coming into us, Patrick, on just one news agency, on AFP, quoting a Ukrainian ministry, and another line that they have just fed through as well. The sooner that Russia agrees a just peace, the sooner these incursion raids will stop, which gives us this motivation for why they have done it, obviously. But we're now also seeing President Putin come out yesterday saying there's a major provocation, reports saying he's absolutely furious about this. You have to wonder what the Russian response will be now, what the potential is of what he could do there.
Well, I think the one thing's expected is that the Russians may bombard Ukrainian civilian infrastructure to increase the cost of this to them. Yeah, I think that would be expected. And I think the second thing then is, of course, is moving forces to deal with this. They've already combined the FSB, which is the internal security, with the military to get better command and control and brought in a raft of restrictions in the area to basically lock it down and have better command and control of that. I would have to see about this new statement. Maybe it's also might be trying to muddy the waters and catch Putin came out yesterday and said they're clearly trying to take territory for negotiations. Maybe it's a response to that. We'll have to see. Maybe the Ukrainians just want to muddy the waters and make it more difficult to ascertain the real goals here. One of the takeaways is that Ukraine has proved in areas away from the front line where Russia has persistent intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, so basically drones, oversight, it's very difficult to do anything without being spotted. In areas away from that, they've been able to concentrate their forces and break through fairly easily. And they could do that again. It's not saying that they have an inexhaustible bunch of forces here, but they certainly have proven the ability to pick somewhere and break through. And that will be in the back of the Kremlin's minds in the future, because it basically means you're going to have to harden the defenses across that border if you really want to stop this happening again.
Patrick, very good to get your thoughts. And as soon as we have more from Kyiv, we will certainly bring it to you and continue updating you on that story.